from Kern Government Television. Welcome to this week's Kern County Board of Supervisors meeting. Originating from the County Administrative Center, located at 1115 Truxton Avenue in Bakersfield, California. Grounded in ideas, energy, and innovation, Kern County's vision is to be a driving force for the world's fifth largest economy. And our mission is to exceed expectations of the communities we serve, changing the way they feel about government, those who manage it, and the services it provides. Today's Kern County Board of Supervisors meeting will convene momentarily.
Board to reconvene. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Supervisor Peters.
Here.
Supervisor Scribner.
Here.
Supervisor Maggard.
Here.
Supervisor Couch.
Here.
Supervisor Perez. Oh, I think I heard a here in the background.
Okay, yeah, I hear it too. It's official. Okay, we will, first of all, good morning and welcome to the Tuesday, September 27th, 2022, 9 a.m. meeting of the Kern County Board of Supervisors. We will begin today's meeting with the flag salute led by Supervisor Couch. If you could please remain standing for a moment of prayer, silence, or meditation, whichever you prefer.
Ready, salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be seated. Next, I'd like to call on Nick Cullen. He's our Director of Animal Services to introduce our Pet of the Week. Good morning, Nick.
Good morning to you.
Who do we have with us today?
This angry little bundle of joy here is Timothy. He's about a 5-week-old kitten. We need foster for him, primarily because he's 5 weeks, but he's also visually challenged. We don't think he sees definitions. He sees lights and shadows, but he's just 5 weeks old, so he can't survive on his own. He's very unhappy because I took him away from his food right now, and he's biting me really good. But he needs foster, and he's available right now.
All right. Well, I know there's someone out there that is going to call about him. So, Timothy, best of luck to you. And, Nick, thank you for all you do and all the folks down there that work for you.
Thank you.
All right. Next, we're going to consider the consent agenda. And agendas are located on the tables near the doors for anyone wishing to follow along. All items listed with a CA above the item are considered to be routine and non-controversial by county staff. Consent items will be considered first and may be approved by one motion. If a member of the audience wishes to comment or ask questions regarding an item on the consent agenda, they may do so prior to a vote being taken. A member of the board may remove any item from the consent agenda that will be listed and considered in listed sequence with an opportunity for any member of the public to address the board concerning the item before action is taken. A member of the public may also comment on any closed session items, and now I will read the consent agenda items. Starting on page 2, we have items 1 and 2, as well as item number 4 on consent. On page 3, items 8 through 12 are on consent, and so are 14 and 15. So item 13 is off consent. On page 4, all items 16 through 22 are on consent. On page 5, all items 23 through 29 are on consent. Page 6, all items 30 through 36 are on consent. Page 7, all items 37 through 44 are on consent. And finally, on page 8, all items 45 through 47 are on consent. So at this time, I'll ask if there's any members of the public joining us today that would like to make a comment on any of those consent items that I mentioned. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Michael Turnipseed. I represent the Kern County Taxpayers Association. I'm talking about item 16, which is the Fruitvale School District asking you to deauthorize $13.9 million of potential bond issuances for various reasons. One of the things that happened in the early 2000 to 2010 era, when bond measures were being passed, there were some very poorly crafted bonds, and still half the bonds in the state of California that were passed in that area can't be issued. One of the things we took on at Kern Tax, getting involved back in 2007 in school facility bond financing, is we look at these districts that can't issue the debt. In the case of not only Fruitvale, but several other districts, they can only issue part of their authorization and can't issue the rest of it till the 30 years is done. So 30-year bonds become 60-year bonds, and that's not what the taxpayers voted for. So we not only ask, but we basically demand of the district to support their new bond, that they deauthorize this $13.9 million from 2006. And that's going to result in a savings to taxpayers of the Fruitvale School District of about $27 million. So we earned our pay today, and it's a good story about how school districts responsibly are working with us to get fiscally responsible school bonds. And with this action and others over the last 17, 18 years in Kern County, we have saved taxpayers $2 billion over the next 25 to 30 years in bond payments.
Great work, Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Turnipseed. Any other comments or questions on the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none, then I'll return to the board for questions, comments, or a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent.
Second.
You have a motion and a second. Please cast your votes.
The motion is approved. All ayes.
Thank you. That brings us back to page 2 on our agenda, item number 3. This is a public request. It's a request of Kenny Williams, City Manager and Police Chief of the City of McFarland, to address the Board of Supervisors regarding the city's request to transition the McFarland branch of the Kern County Library to the City of McFarland for use by the Police Department. Good morning.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
We do. And Madam Clerk, we had notified Mr. Williams and his staff of a 10-minute time limit, and so the clock is set for 10 minutes, and so you have all of that time available to you, sir.
Thank you so much. I'll try to keep it short. So good morning, everyone. My name is Kenny Williams. I'm the City Manager and the Chief of Police for the City of McFarland. I'd first like to thank you today for allowing us to speak. I'd also like to thank Mr. Alslop and Mr. Zervers for meeting with us a few weeks back and coming and looking at our issues that we have concerning our police building. So thank you so much for that. I believe they would agree, after looking at what we have in the city, that we have far outgrown our police building, and we are in dire need of a larger structure to allow us to appropriately address the needs of public safety in our community. To get a full perspective of our community and the need for the city to continually focus on public safety, you only need to look at our history. So several years ago, the city had a significant financial crisis that caused us to hire some questionable officers with questionable backgrounds. The reason why is because we couldn't pay what we needed to pay. In addition, and I don't know if you know this, but for almost 2 years, we had a part-time police department. And what I mean by that, officers would come on at noon, and they get off at midnight. From midnight till noon the next day, we didn't have anybody on our patrol. We had nobody to respond to patrol services and emergencies. Terrible way to run a police department. We have since corrected all that. We've hired reputable officers. We've got rid of the people that had some issues, and we're moving in the right direction. So we are now 24/7, so it's great. But we are not done. We still need improvement. I'm not sure if the county is aware, but the city of Delano and the city of McFarland is bifurcated by the boundary of the northern gangs and the southern gangs of California. And so what do gangs do? They come and they shoot up each other in our communities. We've had 3 homicides in the city of McFarland so far this year. We've had multiple shootings, and they are brutal. So as a city manager, as our elected officials, which we have several of them here today, we have some of our residents here today, we can all agree on one thing. We need to continue to improve our police department in the city of McFarland and the size of our building is not conducive to that improvement. So after a year and a half of me being there as their chief, I have not asked for one more patrol officer, and the reason why is because we have no place to put them. The police department is situated in a space which prohibits us from efficiently and effectively carrying out our law enforcement functions. Officers must share a small office, and I have 4 sergeants that share one small office as well. The property room is significantly overgrown. We are forced to store some of our property actually on the exterior parts of our building. In addition, staff must use 1 small locker and 1 small bathroom for all genders. We are in the midst of developing plans to engage our youth population. The plans include expansion of a police activity league, the formation of an Explorer program, and increasing our school resource program. All of these require space, such as meeting rooms and office, to coordinate these programs. So I've been asked multiple times, why the library? And so with that, there were 3 reasons that the city actually looked at the library as an option for us. And first and foremost was the library was only being used twice a day by the county. It was only open 2 times a week, and it was only for 6 to 7 hours. So it was 14 hours of use each week. The city would use that as a police department 24/7, and we would occupy it 24/7. The second part of that is the cost of converting that building into a police department is a lot less expensive than building from ground up. And then the third reason we looked at it is because, and this is really extremely important, is the time frame in which we can convert that would be extremely quick compared to building ground up. And so when you look at all of those components, that's the reason we looked at it, or we would have looked elsewhere. As a city, we recognize the value of a library service to the community, and we still want that library service. We want to offer that. That's a benefit to us. We recognize that. However, there is no explanation that anyone can give me that would provide or would persuade me to believe that providing a library service is more important than providing basic public safety service to our community. Now, with all that being said, we don't want to eliminate the library, as I said. We recognize the value of providing that service, and what we would like is look at is a win-win. Keeping the library and expanding the police department is the best of both worlds. I don't want to overlook the graciousness of Mr. Oslop and Mr. Zervis, as they both indicated the county's desire and their dedication to help us resolve the police building issue, and I certainly believe their heart's in the right place. What I'm uncertain about is how they would help us overcome the issue of timeliness. We need it now. We don't need it 5 years down the road. We need to do something now. And the cost of the building. We don't have a lot of money. With all that being said, we certainly don't want to sound ungrateful for the offers from Mr. Oslop and Mr. Zervis and the county, and we welcome whatever help the county can provide and look forward to partnering with the county in whichever manner that we can. We also recognize that this is a county decision. This is not a city decision. We've made the request, and it's up to you fine folks to figure out if you'll allow that request or not. And whatever decision you make, we'll respect that decision and we'll move on from there. So with that, at this time, I'd like to introduce our honorable council member, Mr. Soloion, to speak on this matter as well. Thank you.
Good morning, members of the board. My name is Soloion. I am a resident of McFarland and currently serve on the McFarland City Council. After a lifetime living in McFarland, I became frustrated with the lack of basic services available in our community and decided to do something about it, running for council in 2020. Shortly after taking office, my council colleagues and I discovered layers upon layers of fiscal issues that were a direct result of decades of mismanagement. Addressing the mismanagement that plagued our community for all these years have been the primary focus of our work for the last few years, and we've been very effective. Now that we have largely addressed those issues, our underserved community is faced with the reality of building and rebuilding the basic infrastructure and systems necessary for our community to thrive. As you know, none of these are more critical than public safety. Today, the McFarland Police Department and City Hall share a small 1,698 square foot structure built in 1946. Let me repeat that, built in 1946. The police department, 24 staff members, including police officers, supervisors, dispatchers, and chief, are forced to operate critical safety services in facilities that could not possibly allow them to effectively perform their duties. The lack of facility has hurt the police department's ability to grow with the community. As quickly as the department recruits and trains new officers, exiting officers leave McFarland PD, often citing the work conditions caused by the lack of space. The prior administration left us with a $1.9 million deficit for fiscal year 2019 and 2020 that we were able to retire using one-time monies from the CARES Act and ARPA funds. However, many of these neglected systems remain. To address these issues, the city has two ballot initiatives, including 1% sales tax increase that will come before the voters in November. We believe that these moves will place the city in a better position to avoid deficits going forward, but that increased revenue will only help the city from going into the red and will not help us advance. Further complicating these financial circumstances, the police department's COPS grant will be expiring at the end of the year that currently covers the salary of 7 police officers. The city will be assuming these costs together with the approximately $1.1 million increase in the fire department services contracted by the County of Kern. Based on our city's current resources, it would be impossible to develop and have an adequate police facility without the help of the county. As a council, we are reaching out to the Board of Supervisors asking for your partnership to help us secure an adequate police facility that meets the public safety needs of our residents. Finally, I'd like to thank our district supervisor, Mr. David Couch, together with Ryan and Jim Service, for taking the time to visit our city, our infrastructure challenges, but also our great potential that our city has. Ryan, I hope your neck's okay from driving our streets. We're addressing those issues shortly, but help with the county. I'll be leaving supporting documents that we prepared for each of our fiscal challenges. I'm available to take any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Mr. Ion. Are there any other speakers? You have about 30 seconds left. Any other speakers from the city? If seeing none, I'll now return to the board and ask if there are any questions. Do you have any? Supervisor Couch?
I know Mr. Turnipseed has a comment. Are we going to have public comment as well on the item, or is that required?
I know that we can. I don't know that it's required on this item as it's a presentation. I'll turn to county council. But if we
I didn't know when I should speak or not. That's why I'm just asking for that reason. Let's let Mr. Turnipseed speak, and then we'll talk about that. Can we do that?
Of course.
Michael Turnipseed, excuse me, Michael Turnipseed. I represent the Kern County Taxpayers Association. Closing the library or moving it to a different, smaller, reduced footprint is not what we need to do when we're trying to develop workforce. We have to relook at our library model. We have the lowest funded per capita library system in the state of California. We look at B3K and everything else we're trying to do, and we're talking about workforce development, and we need to really look at using libraries for what they're meant to be, community learning centers. We have a model that's going on in Shafter right now, and I think for the city of McFarland to really, if they're interested in economic development, should look more at developing their workforce and making the library more used and helping it provide more resources and hours in a partnership like Shafter, because if you don't have the workforce and you don't have an educated community, that's part of the crime problem. Exactly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Turnipseed. Now, Ms. Rezan, do I open this up for public comment, further public comment? I'm happy to do so.
Mr. Chairman, yes, I would.
Okay, thank you. I'll ask if there's any other members of the audience who would like to make comment on this item. Madam Clerk, if you could set the clock for 2 minutes, please. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, Board of Supervisors. My name is Jaime Hernandez, and I was volunteered for my family members in McFarland to present today in support of the relocation of the police department. As it was mentioned through the chief and Saul Ayon, the police station The square footage it's still the same. You know, it hasn't doubled. Our population, however, almost doubled within the last 15, 20 years. And the police work requires a lot of confidential tasks. People are overhearing in the neighboring department that do not have any business or related to police work because they're just so crammed in that one building. My nephews currently haven't used the public library. It is to my understanding that the hours increased. However, they've been using the school's library, so it is not the end of the world of the relocation of the police department into the library, I'm pretty much in support of the along with my family, the ties that I have in McFarland. We are in support of the relocation of the police department for the reasons mentioned above. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Jim White, longtime resident, 58 years in McFarland, pastime coach. I've seen the library come in. I've seen the library not being used. I've seen the old library. The new library has actually only been used about 2 days a week, and primarily for babysitting. I've been in there, and most of the schools, all the schools, they have their own library. They have all of the books that they use for the internet. All the kids in our program do. I'm definitely in support of you helping us find a way for a better solution for our police department. I've been in the police department when Chief Williams says they have one bathroom and it's smaller than a closet. That's 58 years worth of nothing. Our enrollment citywide is basically about 16,000. When I went there 58 years ago, it was 4,000. So we have grown, but our city police department has not grown. We've got smaller and smaller. We went down to 3 policemen. When we had different city managers, we had no funding. And like Chief Williams said, we had shootings just about every night. Every night. There's nobody to cover. And that was made public to everybody through the existing chief of police at the time. Oh, they made a statement that we don't have any coverage. Well, once all the shootings take place. We do need help, and we appreciate your help. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else, please?
Good morning, Kern County Supervisors. My name is Danny Sanchez. I'm a longtime resident of both McFarland and Delano. I'm here in support of the transition of the Kern County Library in McFarland to become the new police department. This location is ideal. It's a bigger and better building that can be altered to benefit the police department that hopes to grow, recruit more qualified candidates and provide better police services for the community. As you already know, the corrupt and criminal previous council decided many years ago to stop paying the Kern County Sheriff's Office for services. They created their own legacy by creating a police department without taking into consideration how it would affect their community in the long term. The community of McFarland has been underserved for many years, and this new council has had to pick up the broken pieces for both the police department and the city. Did you know that victims of sex crimes are interviewed in holding cells for people who have been arrested? This is how they've been forced to conduct business to treat victims of sex crimes. I think that a bigger building, a better building, a more ideal building would be more appropriate for these type of victims or any type of victim in the city of McFarland. This is a simple decision. I would hope that you would let Saul Ayon and the Chief Williams continue to repair the city and its police department. It's simple economics. Save the city of McFarland $10 million or save them $12 million. I hope you guys make the right decision. Again, I back Chief Williams. Any decision that you make will be accepted by us and the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Okay, seeing none, I'll close the public comment period and turn to Supervisor Couch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the time today. Would staff, either CAO or librarian, would you all like to make any comment before I make some comments? I'm asking if you would like to.
While Ms. Apple's coming up, I'll take advantage of the invitation, Supervisor.
Thank you.
And I'm happy to answer any questions. Appreciate the officials from McFarland being here today. And I appreciated, as did Mr. Zerfus, their time in meeting with us a few weeks back, touring the police station. As you well know, and everybody should know, that the county is not responsible for public safety operations in the city of McFarland. That said, the situation with their police facility is pretty obvious to me, and I concur with everything that they've said. They are certainly in need of more space. And we saw that. And however, I don't believe, if you're asking for any recommendation or my thoughts on the matter, I don't believe that, cannibalizing a library that was built specifically to be a library and is operated to be a library, dedicated as such, in a very nice building, should be the first thing we jump to. I understand the thought process of Mr. Williams and members of the council in identifying that building. It's certainly a nice building, and it certainly could be retrofitted in some way to become a police station. I think that needs to be the very last option and done only under extraordinary circumstances. If your board today ordered Andy and I to proceed with giving the library up, we certainly would do that. But it should be the very last thing that we do. And we communicated that to the members of the city of McFarland that we met with a few weeks back. My commitment to them is that we will work hand in hand with them rigorously, starting as soon as possible to help them address and achieve their goals and objectives around a new police station, which we believe is needed there. I believe there are a number of options available to them in terms of space and property that's immediately there in the city center. I believe that there are a number of options available to them, whether it's low-cost public financing, grant opportunities, or legislative earmarks. The city of Shafter just got $6 million for a new police station in the state budget, as an example. There are a multitude of ways to achieve, I believe, the goal of getting this police station done. So our commitment is to work with them and to do it in a rigorous fashion and aim for success so that we avoid having to go in and dismantle that current library location. So that's our commitment. We stand behind it. We're willing to get to work. I would say, to address Mr. Williams' issues on timeline, they've got a vacant lot right next door. Get a couple of mobile units, put some temporary landscaping in there. It can be air conditioned. Open some office space up for your officers there. maybe get a portable bathroom there while we work on this, if time is of the essence. But that was our offer to the city of McFarland, and we are very happy to work directly with them and closely with them to try and achieve these things going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alsop. Good morning.
Good
Ms.
morning.
Sullivan.
I agree that the City of McFarland Police Department definitely needs another building. I do not think that the library is the best choice. It was built in 1994 with federal funds dedicated specifically for library construction. You know, the school department or the school district, they're the ones that donated that land, and it's great that we're connected to them because it is the kids and the families after school that come and use the library every single day. Workforce development programming, I agree. It definitely is needed in our rural communities. Just being open for 5 days for the last 2 weeks, we had over 3,500 people walk through our doors. That's almost a quarter of the population of McFarland. So we are making a difference, more hours, more programming, more staffing. It does help communities like McFarland. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Couch.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I was plugged in, Zach? You see me
Excuse me,
there?
Perez. Supervisor Perez.
Thank you. Ryan, I'm curious about the BSCC, the prison board. They are the overseers of jails, and they have tons of grants and so much money. We often didn't know how to get rid of it fast enough at the prison board BSCC that I used to sit on. So I would, I don't know what's going to happen here. Obviously, this is early conversations, but it sounds like there's been a quadrupling of the population, and since at least the gentleman who came down and gave us his testimony, it certainly seems justifiable, and there seems to be a lot of passion there. So I'm curious what we could do with the prison board and BSCC. I've got relationships there. I'm very good friends with their administration, and those are really good people. I think they would want to help Kern County. I think that's a real option for us to explore, and we should look into it, and I would really be delighted. They oversee, of course, all the institutions. They were, of course, responsible for the rebuilding or the building of our new jail, as Donnie knows. And so they have lots of money, and they are really interested in these kind of facilities and their, how they function, and I just think there's something there. So if I can help in any way, to the folks at McFarland, I think we have an in there, and this seems like the perfect opportunity to get a state-of-the-art facility that is going to meet the needs of the community. Just a thought.
Thank you, Supervisor. Supervisor Couch, did you have additional questions or comments?
Yeah, if you'll indulge me just a couple of minutes. First of all, I want to thank all the speakers and the folks that came from McFarland today. I want to go back a little bit and describe how we got here, because it didn't happen just overnight. I've forgotten how long ago it was that I actually took a walk with you, council member, and your previous city manager a couple of years ago. Yeah. And the issue was raised then, and then it was raised maybe more seriously about a year ago, I'm going to guess. And at that time, I said, before we head down the path of closing a library for any reason, I want to make sure that the community of McFarland is solidly behind this idea. And the only thing I knew to do was to ask you all. There are basically three government entities in McFarland. There's the city of McFarland, mayor and council. There's the McFarland Rec and Parks District, or Park and Recs, I forget which one they call it. And there's the McFarland Unified School District. And I said I would like a letter from each of those entities, and I would like it to be unanimous from each of those entities that this is what they would like to see happen. And it didn't take all that long. It took time for them to get things on an agenda and people to discuss it and take action. But within a couple of months, we received those letters. I think each letter signed by all the members of each agency. I could be wrong about that. There might be one or two that were signed by a mayor or a chairman, but they were unanimous votes to send us those letters. So I feel that we owed it to you all to at least have this discussion today. And Mr. Alsop is right. It's not our responsibility to provide public service, but it is our responsibility, I believe, especially when a community shows that kind of unity behind an idea, for us to do what we can to help you get there. Doesn't mean we have to pay for it all. Doesn't mean we have to pay for any of it. But how did you say it, Ryan? Working hand in hand rigorously. I wrote that down. I think that's a good idea, and I'm going to get to that in just a second. I also want to thank Jim and Ryan for going up there and touring maybe more than just the facility around McFarland and seeing, their police station, taking a look at the library, and the rest of the city. Mr. Williams, I want to ask you a question, because I want to clear something up, and I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. I admit it. And you and I have had this discussion in the past, at least one time. You walked down to the library. This is several months ago. You paid a visit to the library when this was being researched, and you were in the middle of looking at bids or getting bids. And I think you went there after school was out, and it was busy.
Yes, sir.
To say the least. There were, I don't know. Describe for me the scene. There was a few kids, several kids. I don't know how many, and it was noisier than you had experienced in your previous days in your attendance to a library.
Sure. Yes, I kind of hate to give up where I used to go to the library, but it used to be where the current public defender's office is. But in those days, the library was extremely quiet. It was a place of study, a place to go in and read and those type of things. And so I did. I wanted to visit and see what the library in McFarland was like. And so I went over there to get a grasp of everything we were looking at. And the library is located adjacent to one of our schools, Kern Elementary. And so when I visited, the school had just gotten out, and there was probably 50, maybe 30 to 50 kids from the school, and it was extremely noisy. And certainly you couldn't study in there in any grasp without being disturbed, unless you had a headset on or something. So it was different for me, and I understand now that's kind of how the libraries are. They cater, and the kids come, and it's kind of a place to hang out. And so I did speak to some of the librarians that were there at the time, and I expressed my concern. First, I said, it got quiet all of a sudden, so I said, hey, where'd everybody go? And they said, well, they went outside to play cornhole for a while to kind of work out some of that energy, because kids have a lot of energy. And then I said, well, it's rather noisy in here when they're in. And she said, well, yeah, it's kind of like a daycare when the kids are here. And so, that resonated a little bit with me. Certainly I thought about that moving forward, that, libraries are different now, and that's where kids kind of congregate. And I don't think that's a bad thing, but it certainly is different than it used to be in regards to that. But there is a lot of kids that visit the library right after school, and they stay there until the parents get off of work, and then the parents will pick them up from there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. So when I heard that story, it's a little jarring to hear it described as a daycare, because that's not my perception of what a library ought to be. Maybe it is. Ms. Sullivan, I have a question, and his comments and that story sort of lead me to a discussion that we have had before, and we don't agree on this. That's okay. It makes the world go round. The core services of the library, I don't really know what they are, because I think in my view, they're too numerous. You want to comment on that, the way libraries are viewed? the way you view them now and the way maybe an old guy like me views them?
Sure. So the library serves all ages, you know, from birth to 100 plus. So we have to have something for everybody. Maybe someone used the term daycare, I would use the term active learning. We try to set up active learning opportunities for those kids that come in after school, because there's a lot of them. They're looking for something to do, so we try to provide programming. We have snacks in the stacks right now, along with a meal, they get a program. So it's very different than what it was even 30 years ago. I don't like a quiet library. My staff know I don't like a quiet library. I want to encourage the communication, the collaboration. To me, that grows the workforce, the local workforce. Those are those kids right there. They're going to be in our workforce in 10, 15 years. And we want them to be able to work together and have those skill sets. So it's very different than what it was, let's say, in the 80s or 90s.
Well, that, I believe, we didn't talk much there about the core services. Go ahead.
Sorry. I was just saying, we serve everybody, so we try to have programming for everybody. Providing books is one of our main service, providing online resources, providing education, community education, workforce development. We have numerous programs and services trying to reach as many people as possible.
My recollection of our conversation was, I'll just be blunt, every time I brought up any type of program, it was described as a core service. And it was, to me, it was so broad, the word core kind of lost its meaning for me, because adult coloring and coffee, to me, is not a core service of the library.
Programming is, so I guess it's how you define programs. You know, that helps with mental health.
Programs is pretty broad, you're right.
Yeah.
So I would like to have a really robust and vigorous, we do department head, this is for the benefit of people that are listening or watching. We do a review of our department heads at least once a year. And I don't know, they start usually in November, they probably finish in December, maybe January. So I would like to really have a robust and vigorous discussion about what the core services of our libraries are.
Sure.
And I completely agree with Mr. Turnipseed about the Learning Center concept. And I think we need to look no further than what the city of Shafter has done. And have you been there lately, by the way? Have you seen it?
Mm-hmm.
It's outstanding. And we owe a lot of that, well, we owe all of it to the city of Shafter and Bakersfield College for their putting.
And they have dedicated effort and funds to education. Part of that education is the library. So that's the component. We have to dedicate funding to our education as a county agency, and to me, that's libraries.
That's what we're gonna talk specifically about that. But we can talk about it out here if you want, but you might not want to. But if you want to, we can.
No, the only other comment I wanted to make is the difference between a school library and a public library. School libraries, as well as college libraries, are there for the curriculum for the students. They're not there for the public.
Right.
Whereas, you know, we have adults that like to read as well as kids. So it's a different mission.
Well, I just wanted to let you know that when we do our reviews, and you're one of the people that we review, that's what I want to discuss. And I'm going to be in touch with you before that, or your staff, whoever you like, so I can be really prepared for that. Thank you.
Absolutely.
When the folks that are here from the front, thank you, Ms. Sullivan.
Okay.
Thank you. When you all leave today, I want you to know this. It appears to me that we have some options. One, we could do nothing. That's always an option. We could hand the library, sell the library over to the city of McFarland. You can move your police department into it. We could do that and work with BC somehow to create some sort of a learning center environment, which would be a win for our library system, I think. We could help you build a new police department. That doesn't seem to fit the timeline you want, but that's an option, and leave the library exactly where it is, potentially bringing in Bakersfield College. So I heard Mr. Alsop say he was, what was the word, Ryan? Work hand in hand rigorously with the city of McFarland. I want you to know that I'm going to be fully engaged with him and his staff in that effort. Probably more so than they've ever seen, more so than they might want. But when we finish this meeting, I'd like us to walk away with a couple of action, not right this second, because we're not taking any action today. But I'd like us to come out of here with a commitment that we're going to meet periodically. I don't know how often that needs to be. We need to have a discussion about that. I would think at least monthly, maybe every couple of weeks. We can do that over Zoom. We can do that in person. I think in person works a lot better. We can come to you. You can come to us. I don't want us to just send you an email that says, here's some links. Go look for some low-interest loans and some grants. I don't want that to be the end of our effort. I don't think it will be, but I want to make sure that you understand it's not going to be a minimal effort on our part if I have anything to do with it. And Mr. Alsop sounded like he was working hand in hand rigorously was what he was going to do. So I'd like to give that some time. I know you don't have a lot of time. I know you want to move forward quickly, but I want to give our staff a chance to help you and maintain what the library as it is. But we don't want to give you, I'm not talking about years. I'm talking about a relatively short amount of time where you can get comfortable with some kind of progress. And I don't know how long that is. We need to have a discussion about that. That's my commitment to you all. Last question. This is probably, well, I don't know who this is for. It's either for Ryan or for Ms. Sullivan. The McFarland Library used to be open for 2 days. Now it's open for 5. I saw a press release recently, and I thank you for your email explaining that McFarland was the only library so far that got any additional hours. You have plans to hire more personnel, train them, get them deployed in other branches, and increase hours somewhere around the October, November timeframe. Do I have that right?
Correct, November.
Okay. What was the objective criteria that was used to decide that the one library that was going to get additional hours starting this fiscal year was McFarland?
Mr. Alsop?
Yeah, Supervisor Couch, through the chair, I had given Andy the go-ahead to open that library. We're trying to open all of our libraries back to 5 days a week, and we started with McFarland for 2 primary reasons.
So what? Yeah, the objective criteria is what I'm after.
Right. There were 2 primary criteria with opening McFarland. One was the situation with Shafter. We've given up the Shafter Library entirely and all of the funding for the City of Shafter Library to the City of Shafter and BC. And that library is out in that part of the county, and it allowed us to free up staff to move to other areas. Now, we also applied for $15, $16 million in library improvement grants. We applied for 17 different branches.
Yes.
And got funded for all 17 branches. We didn't include any upgrades for the McFarland Library branch because of this situation. We didn't know what the future of the McFarland Library was going to be. There will be a second, maybe a third round of grant funding, but because most of the other libraries are receiving grant money to get infrastructure upgrades, upgrades to HVAC systems, carpeting, things like that, because McFarland didn't, we didn't apply there. We wanted to, we had to pick a location to open first, and that was the location we picked.
I'd like to know what those improvements are to the McFarland, that are needed to the McFarland Library, upgrades, maintenance improvements, because that building looks nice to me.
You know, we haven't assessed the McFarland since it wasn't one of the application, it wasn't on the application, but probably the carpet. I think it's probably been there since the 90s when it opened. And there might be some other minor infrastructure upgrades that need to be had. You know, their ADA, linoleum.
So really, the reason for opening the library was not the request to use it for something else. Because I've heard that from the community. Man, if you want to get more hours to your library, let's just find something else that we want to use it for. That had nothing to do with it. Is that correct?
I didn't follow you, Supervisor Couch. Sorry.
The reason for additional days and hours at the McFarland Library had nothing to do with the request from the city of McFarland to utilize it for a police station. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. We're trying to open
Okay.
all branches for 5 days a week.
Thank you. Thank you, Andy.
You're welcome.
Gentlemen, thank you for coming today. I don't have any other comments, but you heard my commitment to you all. You heard Mr. Alsop, and we'll be in touch very soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Maggard?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Sullivan, may I ask you one more question? I apologize that you walked all the way back there. While you're walking back down to the microphone, I want to congratulate the city of McFarland for correcting the course that you're on and that you have been on. It's tough to do that, and I admire that you're facing tough issues, and so congratulations on that, and good luck with it. But as you go forward, we're not done talking about this. We'll talk about it some more, but I want to make sure you know I appreciate and respect that you guys for doing what you're doing. Ms. Sullivan, sometimes when we take federal money and use it for projects, for example, working on an airport, a remote airport in some part of Kern County, if we were to decide not to use that property as an airport anymore, we have to pay back all that federal money. Did you say it was federal money that was used to build this particular library? And if so, are there any strings attached to it that if...
It was 20 years. It had to be a library for 20 years. And I think it opened in 1995, so that has expired.
So it expired. Very good. Okay. Good to know. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Supervisor Perez?
That's the first thing I checked, by the way.
Well, I want to really thank the folks in McFarland that are coming out and working with their police chief. That's very exciting to see you being creative about fixing your problems at the local level. No one knows that community like you do. And I would love to help you in any way that I can, even though it's not my part of the world. It looks like Supervisor Couch is working closely with you, and that's fantastic. I certainly would love to offer any expertise that I may have in the building world and in the prison world, because I have got a lot of folks there that I know would be interested in helping Kern County. I feel very confidently about that. But I really want to extend a special thank you to Mike Turnipseed, to our library director, and our CAO, Ryan Alsop, for being devoted to closing the skills gap and raising the literacy level. We don't like talking about it because it's embarrassing. But the truth is, for any population above 250,000, we are the least literate in the United States of America. For the 98 largest metropolitan areas from coast to coast, we have the second highest youth disconnected rate, meaning a quarter of our kids between 16 and 24 are not in school and not working. This is an increasing problem for Kern County. It is directly correlated with our public safety, with the amount of stress and overload that we see at every public safety agency in Kern County. We are most assuredly at a tipping point. Our sales tax measure is absolutely critical so that we can have the funds to hire, to pay well. We should pay better than anyone in the state of California, given our proximity, given where Delano is in the larger world of gang activity within the state of California. We are a special location, and we deserve to be well funded, not just here locally, but outside of here. I believe that. I'm a big supporter of my sheriff and his department, and closing the gap between our public safety partners. But the issue of our workforce is absolutely critical to the future of Kern County. The people who create jobs, who come and make investments, who have money to make and money to spend, look at the workforce as their #1 issue as to whether or not they can make money or not. And when they look at a population that does not have the skill set to compete, hardworking, family-oriented, patriotic, faith-oriented, but don't have the skill set, can't read the language. This is a serious problem for Kern County, and eliminating places that people can acquire a skill set to be able to pay their own bills and compete along with every other American to achieve their dream is the fundamental building block of Kern County. So both of these matters are utterly critical. I believe that this board supports you in your law enforcement efforts. I have not seen this board be concerned with the literacy issues or education of this population. I just don't see it. But it is a major issue, and I'm so grateful that our Taxpayer Association and our CAO and our library director do get it. And I think we can achieve all of these things working together. So thank you so much for being here. Anything I can do to help you, I promise you, I will. Supervisor Couch knows how to get a hold of me. We have each other's phone numbers. We work together all the time. And I would be delighted to help. But also, if you have it under wraps, I don't need to step in unnecessarily. But those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Supervisor Peters.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to say first, our libraries, I think, are doing a fantastic job. I got to go down recently and do a read along with some of the kids down there, and they're laughing and yelling and reading along, having a good time. It was awesome to see. But I also know that for these kids to learn, for families to go and get engaged and stay connected in the community, they need to feel safe. So I definitely understand the need for growing that police department. And this is an issue that I don't have much background on, so I'm going to keep my comments pretty brief. But I would like to know, does the McFarland Police Department believe that moving into this building will meet their entire needs, or would this be a building they would need to move into in addition to the building they're currently in? That the building would meet the entire need? Okay. I think that's the only question I have for right now. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor. Any other questions or comments from the board? Okay, thank you. This item is just to hear the presentation. I don't think we need a motion to receive and file on this. And so we will then move on to...
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And thank you for the folks that came this morning to speak on the item. Next item on the agenda is public presentations. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons to address the board on any matter not on this agenda, but under the jurisdiction of the board. Board members may respond briefly to statements made or questions posed. They may ask a question for clarification, make a referral to staff for factual information, or request staff to report back to the board at a later meeting. Also, the board may take action to direct the staff to place a matter of business on a future agenda. Speakers are limited to 2 minutes, so we ask if anyone would like to make a public presentation, now's the time. Good morning.
My name is Gilbert Tarr. I'm from Quebec. I have 2 comments to make. The first is Ridge Route Drive, the opening, which is a county road, is full of debris. It needs to be cleaned out. I'd like this done. I talked to BJ, supposed to be in Fraser Park and supposed to represent this area. He can't even call me back. Very sad. He's in the area. He can't even call me and meet me so I can show him what needs to be done. Second of all, I didn't get a tax bill from this county, and I want to know why. Thank you.
Very good. Well, we can ask our code compliance office through Public Works to take a look at Ridge Route Drive, and as far as the tax bill is concerned, I think we can work through our CAO's office to get an answer for you from the Treasurer Tax Collector's office.
I did get a comment from Code Compliance and Public Works Department yesterday in the mail, and they're going to do nothing. Is it you want me to push the mess out in the road, or it has to be cleaned, something has to be done? They say they're not going to do anything. You want me to push it out in the road so they have to clean it up? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, the response from the Public Works Department was essentially that this is a civil matter within the jurisdiction of the courts, and so they encourage you to seek relief through the courts, as we've told you, I think, on multiple occasions when you visited. So we appreciate your comments. Any other public comments, please? Good morning.
Hello. My name is Engelbrecht, and I'm here to address the Engelbrecht identity theft, which I've been reporting for well over a decade, and the FBI and the DOJ have done nothing. But today I would like to bring up Bakersfield's very own Vincent Engelbrecht, who has been approved for a planned unit community with a solar company named Ultralight 2 Residential with a post office box out of Austin, Texas. And Jennings Realty has real estate agent Michelle Sogi with a Austin, Texas phone number listed on the back of our printed in China phone books. And Jennings Realty has a post office box J. That's really nice. And they're working closely, I'm sure, with Texas Tea Party leader Catherine Engelbrecht, who was raided by the FBI and investigated on terrorism. She's also very closely working with Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, who's been under indictment for securities fraud since 2015, but still in office, just like Kremlin Kevin McCarthy, who was busted on treason and financial crimes, but he just got to donate his money to any nonprofit, which would probably be Self-Help Enterprises, which is in Tulare County working with our Fraser Park Water District and convicted felon Johnny Allison. So, you know, if the FBI's wanting to see any of those Mar-a-Lago documents that are missing, they might want to go ahead and raid Congressman McCarthy, because he's a threat to our, you think it's funny, Letitia? He's a threat to our criminal, he's a threat to our society, okay? And he's already sold us out to Russia and China and Iran, and you can just ask the Bakhtiars about that, and he put the daughter in U.S. Navy. Okay, so the public is being fleeced by the politicians and the banks, and we're in a mess. And I don't know how much I'm supposed to put up with, but I've been dealing with this for well over a decade.
Ma'am, your time has expired. If you could please bring your comments to a close.
All of our time has expired because Wall Street is decimating Main Street, and the public is being fleeced by. Incredibly so, and Newsom has never responded, and he knows too. And I hope the FBI is listening, and I hope they raid McCarthy, and it's District 20 and 23 are commingled on the ballot. District 20 is Tulare County.
Ms. Engelbrecht,
and it was on the ballot, District 20, we're 23.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kremlin Kevin.
Thank you. Any other speakers, please? Okay, seeing none, then we'll move on to board member announcements or reports. Do you have any board member announcements or reports? Supervisor Peters.
Thank you, Chairman Scrivener. I would like to ask that today we adjourn this meeting in honor of Mo Mojibi. Mo's a pillar of the community and unfortunately passed away in a tragic accident recently. So I would just ask that we adjourn in his memory today.
Thank you, Supervisor. Seeing no other comments, then we'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is an item under the Auditor, Controller, County Clerk. This is a presentation on the June 7th, 2022 primary election and the status of preparations for the November 8th, 2022 general election. We have Mary Bedard, who heads up our Auditor, Controller, County Clerk and Elections Department. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I would like to thank you for this opportunity to provide this report to the public and to your board on the June primary election. First, I would like to address some of the challenges we faced. Normally, the odd-numbered years are a time when we can engage in preparations for the following year's primary and general elections to give us a head start on election preparations, in addition to the ongoing duties we do on a daily basis, including updating voter registration records and checking signatures on any measures or initiatives that are submitted. During that time, we can evaluate our processes and make any changes necessitated by changing laws. We reach out to election staff and poll workers after each election for their suggestions on how we can improve our processes. It is also a time when we can do outreach to the community. That is what occurred in 2015, 2017, and 2019. However, we knew that 2021 was never going to be that typical time of preparation, since it was the once every 10-year redistricting year, when we expected to be busy revising precincts due to the new maps. However, with the once every 10-year redistricting occurring in the midst of the once in a 100-year pandemic, 2021 was not the typical redistricting year. With census data delayed, redistricting was pushed into 2022, shortening timeframes normally available to us to prepare for the primary. But we still didn't get that planning time in 2021 since we had to conduct the unexpected statewide recall election. So conducting the 2022 primary election was a challenge for all California counties. Next, I would like to talk about some legislative changes that impacted the June primary. While ballots were mailed to all active registered voters in 2020 and 2021 under emergency executive orders due to the pandemic, in 2021, legislation was passed making this a permanent feature of California elections. New legislation also required all counties to have one official ballot drop box for every 30,000 registered voters. In Kern, this meant a minimum of 15 official drop boxes throughout the county. We actually installed 17 drop boxes to accommodate increases in voter registration. The Elections Office worked with other county departments and agencies to identify areas throughout the county that would be readily accessible to the public. I would like to acknowledge all the departments that worked with us on this, including libraries, fire, public works, DHS, the courts, and the General Services Department for installing the drop boxes. These drop boxes have all the most modern security features. The slot is narrow, designed to handle just a ballot. Each box weighs several hundred pounds and is bolted to the ground. The door to retrieve the ballots is locked with a key. While the boxes were paid for with state grant funds, the county was responsible for paying for the additional staff required to retrieve the ballots on a regular basis. A team of 3 election workers retrieved the ballots every 72 hours in the first few weeks after ballots were mailed out, and every 48 hours, excluding weekends, in the 10 days leading up to the election. The slot can also be locked at 8 p.m. on election night, so voters cannot put a ballot in after the polls close. 2 poll workers were assigned to each drop box on election night. At 8 p.m., they locked the slot and then collected the ballots and took them to the ballot collection site. Stringent chain of custody record keeping was required whenever the ballots were retrieved, showing the time and who was on the team. Numbered security seals were placed on the box after ballots were retrieved, and when the team next collected the ballots, they would confirm that the seal was still intact. Some voters expressed concern that the only thing securing the ballots was the security seal. That was not the case. What was securing the ballots was the lock and key. The seal was just a chain of custody reporting mechanism indicating that the box had not been tampered with. We did have one instance of graffiti on one of the drop boxes, which the election workers were able to clean up when they retrieved the ballots. In addition to using state grant funds for the drop boxes, we were also able to expand our vote-by-mail sorter and extractor equipment using state funds. The county did provide funds to remodel the vote-by-mail room to accommodate the new equipment. While we were not able to increase the overall footprint of the vote-by-mail area, walls were removed to improve the workflow and the efficiency of the operation and to allow for better sight lines for observers. We were able to set up several observation stations so the observers could readily view the various processes mail ballots go through, including sorting the ballot envelopes and extracting the ballots, viewing the 1% manual tally, and duplicating any damaged ballots. We were able to move the signature checking stations from the interior of the room to directly in front of the main observation area so observers could better view the entire process. We worked with IT staff to ensure that the size of the signatures on the screen was as large as possible, Based on numerous conversations election staff had with various observers, the observers were readily able to view the signatures, asking questions and making comments about them. Next, I'd like to talk about our poll workers. For the primary election, we were able to return to in-person training after having remote training for 2020 and 2021. We were able to recruit more poll workers for the primary than for the recall election. For the primary, we recruited over 1,100 poll workers. This was due to a number of factors. During the months leading up to the election, we did outreach to schools and community organizations, providing information and speaking to classes and community groups, both in person and remotely. This included information on the election process, poll worker recruitment, and information on our Adopt a Poll program. Adopt a Poll is a program we have had in place for several years whereby a community organization can agree to staff a precinct or even an entire poll site. Information on this program is available on our website, kernvote.com/pollworkers. We were especially pleased with the response from students. We had over 30 high school students work as poll workers. While this is not as many as we had working elections prior to 2020, it was a huge improvement over the last 2 elections. We are continuing to do outreach and are hopeful that we will have even more students working the November election. We do ask schools and parents to encourage their students to volunteer to assist with this important civic function. It is a great opportunity for students to learn about the process, and students are often among the best poll workers. Another reason we were able to fill more poll worker positions were the changes your board made by increasing the stipend, which hadn't been increased since 2006, and adding the requirement for half of non-public safety county management employees to work at the polls on Election Day. Not only did this increase our pool of poll workers, but having those employees available to be site supervisors and precinct inspectors, along with our experienced community volunteers, resulted in poll sites that were well-run and able to assist voters as needed. We received many compliments from voters about the operation of the poll sites in the primary election. While we didn't have as many observers at the poll sites as in the recall election, there were approximately 20 observers on Election Day. The observers generally understood their rights and responsibilities, and I would like to thank them for their cooperation on Election Day. In addition, some of the observers, along with others in the community involved with elections and the media, attended some of our poll worker training sessions. While this has been available in past elections, the primary was the first time we have seen so many people take advantage of that opportunity to learn about all the duties the poll workers perform. And that did give more people an understanding of how the poll sites operate. And just to give you an idea of the training, we had a total of 59 training sessions. Of those, 43 were in Bakersfield and 16 in the outlying areas. These started 3.5 weeks before Election Day and went up to the day before the election. There were separate classes for clerks and for supervisors and inspectors. The classes are 3 hours long, and they covered everything from setting up the site the night before the election day process, and closing the polls and preparing the ballots for transport to the elections office. Each poll worker is given a training manual that includes the information covered in the class. These manuals are also available to the poll workers at each poll site. Poll workers also receive support on Election Day from their field reps. These are experienced poll workers who are assigned 5 or 6 sites that they travel to throughout the day. If a problem should arise at a poll site, the poll workers can call their field rep, who can generally be there within a few minutes to assist. Senior election staff are also available to answer questions throughout the day from poll workers, observers, and the public. Next, I'd like to talk about statistics for the primary. Turnout for the primary election was 26%. This compares to 49% turnout in the recall election, 72% in November 2020, 41% in March 2020, and 55% in November 2018. However, because there were so many candidates in the statewide races, especially in the governor's race, the June primary was the first time Kern has had a 2-card ballot. This involved making some changes to our processes to account for the second ballot, as well as increasing the processing time for ballot extraction and preparation and tabulation of the ballots than we would have had with the normal single-card ballot. 92% of voters voted their mail ballots compared to 8% who voted in person at the polls. Vote by mail has increased from 65% of voters in November 2018 and 72% in the March 2020 primary when voters had to request a mail ballot to 86% in November 2020, 91% in the recall, and now 92% of voters choosing to vote by mail now that ballots are mailed to all active registered voters. Of the over 104,000 mail ballots cast, the vast majority, over 68,000, were returned through the U.S. Postal Service, while others were returned in person to the elections office. Over 9,600 ballots, or 9%, were dropped in an official drop box. 82% of those were dropped off at the drop box outside the county administrative building, with the remaining 18% being dropped off at one of the new drop boxes located throughout the county. And about 24,000 mail ballots were returned on Election Day. We sent out over 1,100 letters to voters for challenges to vote by mail ballots due to either no signature or the signature not appearing to match what we have on file. And about half of those challenges were cured by the voter by returning a valid signature, leaving 568 challenged ballots not counted, or 0.52%. For comparison, Los Angeles had 6,094 challenged ballots, or 0.44% of their returned vote-by-mail ballots. Next, we'll look at reporting the election results. On election night, counties are required by the state to report within 2 hours of the close of polls. The initial report is run after the polls close at 8 p.m., and most counties, including Kern, post it between 8 and 8:30 p.m. This initial report consists of vote-by-mail ballots that are returned early enough for us to perform all the necessary processes, including signature checking, extracting, and tabulating prior to Election Day. Generally, these are the ballots that are returned by the Friday before the election, and this totaled 25,246 ballots. After the initial report, after 8 p.m., counties are required to update at least every 2 hours, which we do every election, at approximately 10 p.m., midnight, and then approximately 1 a.m. after the ballots arrive from Ridgecrest. Including the poll place ballots tabulated on election night, the final election night count was 30,010, or 26% of total turnout. So 74% of the ballots remained to be counted after election night. These were ballots arriving just prior to or on Election Day, and those postmarked by Election Day and received within 7 days after the election. After Election Day, we posted our first update on Friday, June 10th, along with 43% of California counties. 33% of counties did not post an update until the following week. After our initial update, we updated twice a week, along with most other counties. Kern certified the election on July 7th, 30 days after the election, as required by law, along with 36% of California counties. A total of 53% of counties certified between July 5th and July 7th. Other counties certifying on July 7th, according to the Secretary of State, included San Luis Obispo, Ventura, and San Diego. Los Angeles certified on July 6th. While we did provide updates as often as most other counties, one area in which we did experience delays was in the volume of ballots we were able to process in our early updates. This was because, as I have stated earlier, we had several election workers test positive for COVID the day after the election, which required other staff who were exposed to quarantine. In total, we had about 10 election workers out of the office for anywhere from a few days to over 2 weeks. This amounted to 30% of our staffing at that time. Next, I would like to discuss changes coming for the November election. It's very important for voters to understand the changes that have occurred due to redistricting. This will affect the races they vote on, and in many cases, if they're voting in person, the poll site for their precinct. Because the lines for various districts have changed, a voter's precinct may have been consolidated with a precinct from a different poll site. So while a voter's poll site may still be a poll site, it may not be the poll site for the precinct they are now in. Also, because we are using some additional equipment at the poll sites, some of the smaller poll sites we have used in the past may no longer be suitable for use as a poll site. So it is extremely important for voters who are planning to vote in person at the polls to check the back of their county voter information guide, and that's the one with the sample ballot in it, that shows the poll place for their precinct. Once we get closer to the election, voters can also go to our website, kernvote.com, where they can type their address into our poll place lookup to find their poll site. With redistricting, we now have 308 different ballot types. That's all the different possible combinations of races a voter could be eligible to vote in, with separate ballots, voter information guides, and sample ballots to be prepared. We have 409 voting precincts at over 100 separate polling sites. Some voters who used to be assigned to a voting precinct may now be in what is called a mail ballot precinct. This happens when there are too few voters with the same combination of races they are voting in, and in some cases that's just 5 or 10 voters, to enable us to set up a precinct at a poll site. If a voter assigned to a mail ballot precinct wants to vote in person, we encourage them to come to the election office to vote. That way we can give them the correct ballot type so they can vote on all the races they are entitled to. They can go to a poll site, but they would have to vote provisionally and would receive a ballot that wouldn't contain all the races they were eligible to vote in. Another change I had mentioned to your board previously is that in November, we will be using signature checking software for the first time on the vote by mail ballots. As mentioned previously, while the software will be identifying probable matches, for the November election, we will continue to have election workers review the signatures that the software identifies as matches. That is as a final test of the software so that we can confirm that the criteria we have set for the software would provide the same results as the staff review currently does. Also, we want to provide transparency into the process so the public can have confidence in it. In the November election, because we will continue to review every signature, the software will not speed up our process. But once we and the voters can have confidence in the determinations made by the software in future elections, this would speed up the signature checking process. As in the past, any signatures identified as possibly not matching the signature we have on file during the initial review will go to senior election staff for further review before being considered challenged, and that is as required by law. I mentioned earlier that we will be using additional equipment at the poll sites. These are called electronic poll books. In the past, we've used paper rosters at the poll sites. That's just a list of registered voters for that precinct. Prior to the 2020 election, most large counties had already purchased electronic poll books. However, because Kern was just coming out of the 4-year fiscal emergency, we did not have the funds to purchase electronic poll books. So when counties were required to mail ballots to all active registered voters in 2020, without the electronic poll books that other counties used, the only way we had to maintain the integrity of the vote and ensure that voters did not vote twice was to require voters to surrender their mail ballot at the polls. If they were unable to do this, they had to vote provisionally until the elections office could verify that they had not already voted. This resulted in Kern having the highest number of provisional ballots in the state in November 2020, the 2021 recall election, and in the June primary. In 2021, we were able to use state grant funds to purchase electronic poll books. We have now been able to configure and test them, and they will be used in the November election. This will result in some changes at the poll sites. At most poll sites, instead of going directly to their precinct table, voters will first go to a check-in table where the poll workers will have the electronic poll books. When the voter gives their name, the poll worker will pull them up in the poll book. It will indicate which precinct they are in and whether the elections office has received their voted mail ballot. As long as we have not received their mail ballot and they are at their assigned poll site, they can sign the e-poll book and vote regularly with no need for a provisional ballot. The e-poll book will print out a check-in slip which indicates which table the voter needs to go to for their precinct. This is an example of the information on a check-in slip. The voter takes the slip to the ballot clerk at their table and exchanges it for their ballot. The voter then just votes regularly. The information from the e-poll books is later uploaded so that there is a record of voters who voted at the polls. Once that is done, we can continue with signature checking the mail ballots that arrived on or after Election Day with assurance that no voter is voting twice. I would like to acknowledge the tremendous support we have had over the years from our partners in the community that provide our poll sites. In 2020, one of the biggest problems other counties had was in finding locations for their poll sites. While we did lose a few sites due to COVID, we had churches and schools volunteering to be poll sites, and we actually had more sites in the November 2020 election than we had in the March 2020 primary. While some of these sites may no longer be used, I do want to thank them for their generosity over the years. I would also like to acknowledge the effort put in by the election staff for the June primary and in making the changes necessary for November. In order to make sure that the poll sites could accommodate the e-poll books, we had teams of employees going out for several weeks to survey every one of our poll sites. This was in addition to all the normal work that goes into preparing for an election. These employees are dedicated to improving the voting experience for the voters, as well as maintaining the integrity of the election process. And finally, I would also like to remind everyone that they can go to our website, kernvote.com, for information, and they can click on the transparency video link to learn about the election process and the controls we have in place to maintain the security and integrity of the election process. That concludes my remarks.
Thank you, Ms. Bedard. I appreciate your presentation. I'll go now to the public and ask if there's any members of the audience who would like to make a comment on the presentation. Okay, seeing none, I'll return to the board. Any board members have any comments? Okay, seeing none. Ms. Bedard, thank you for the very thorough presentation. I really appreciated what you said about transparency, and I think that a report like this provides that transparency to the public. I would like to see and I'll ask my colleagues if they would agree, a report out on this upcoming election, on the November election as well, as far as how it went, processes, et cetera, and any areas of improvement that we may have identified. I think it's helpful in light of the fact that we're still in this new way of doing things with all the mail ballots and the requirements that go along with that. So would you be amenable to coming in and giving us another presentation after the November election?
Yes, I'd very much like to do that, yes.
Great, thank you. We appreciate that so much. So colleagues, if there's nothing else then, this item, let's see, I think does this require a receive and file? And this is here presentation, so it doesn't require a motion. I don't see any requests for any referrals to staff. So then we will just move on to the next item on our agenda, item number 13, under Clerk of the Board. This is, thank you so much, Ms. Bedard. This is the selection of the California State Association of Counties CSAC Board of Directors members for 2023. And I'll turn to our clerk, Kathy Kraus, to talk about this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Each year, you're aware that the California State Association of Counties, known as CSAC, requires the election of representatives for all California counties to serve on the CSAC Board of Directors. Your board will need to elect one member and one alternate member for a one-year term before the annual CSAC conference this November. Currently, Supervisor Scrivener serves as the primary member and Supervisor Peters serves as the alternate. Therefore, it's recommended that your board appoint a member and alternate member to the CSAC Board of Directors and direct the clerk of the board to provide notification to CSAC. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I'll just say for my part, I would like to continue as the CSAC representative. I'm scheduled and registered for the upcoming annual meeting in November, and so I would like to continue.
I'm perfectly amenable to that.
Thank you.
I move that slate.
So for the same slate, myself as the representative and Supervisor Peters as the alternate?
Yes, sir.
Second.
Do we have any public comment on this item before we vote? Okay, seeing none, you have a motion and a second. Please cast your votes.
Thank you. The motion is approved. All ayes.
Thank you, colleagues. And that brings us to the conclusion of our agenda for this morning. We do have several items to consider in closed session. We have items 48, 49, 50, 51, and 52, and 53 under County Council. So all items under County Council at this time. And so at this point, I would entertain a motion to adjourn to closed session and to adjourn in the memory of Mo Mojibi as requested.
So moved.
We are adjourned.
Joint leaders and teams. Airmen fly, fight, and win in complex domain environments. To do